Well, hello everyone. I hope you are all well on this beautiful, beautiful Tuesday. It's Tuesday already. Monday gone. Out of here. You're looking fantastic, by the way. Absolutely fantastic. Oh my word, this video is likely going to upset some people. So let's put a few disclaimers out there first of all to cover our bases. And that is that this video is just about spitballing. Talking about some things that in the Idaho 4 case, it could be a possibility. Could be a possibility because there currently is no conclusion. We've got no conclusion. And we have to consider that Bryan Kohberger could be innocent of this crime. And if he is innocent, then someone else is guilty. Because as it stands at the moment, we do not have a conclusion. And that is important. It's very important to understand that. But by no means am I trying to say that the people spoken about in this video are indeed guilty of anything. Because I am just a normal person. I'm not a professional. I'm not a police officer. I do not have any skill in regard to solving crimes, and I certainly don't have any crime-fighting accolades, or I'd have them up there somewhere, or there, in the background, so you could see how good I am. So this is purely about me sharing some thoughts and processes of how I've got to those conclusions with my friends, because you guys, I class you as my friends. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about the Idaho 4 case, obviously, because that's all I talk about recently. So look, if Bryan Kohberger is indeed innocent of this crime, someone else is guilty. And look, I did a video yesterday about the DoorDash delivery driver, and I spoke about why I don't believe Bryan Kohberger is the DoorDash delivery driver. And look, there is a caveat to that, and that is that he could possibly be the DoorDash driver. But I personally believe that if he's the DoorDash delivery driver, then Moscow PD knows he is. And they are purposefully retaining that information to themselves or withholding it from the public. And that could be the thing that says, this is indeed the killer. Because if he was the DoorDash driver, I believe, like JB Gunner, that would mean that he is indeed the killer, because the DoorDash is where this kind of all starts to go in a certain direction. And that is that when you take Jack DeCure out of the equation, you take Showalter out of the equation, you take these people who are ground zero people out of the equation, you're only left with a certain few other theories. And that is that someone completely nothing to do with this area whatsoever came in and did the crime, an opportunist, or the DoorDash delivery driver, because they're the person who sticks out. But we hear Moscow PD cleared them very, very quickly. And I think that could potentially be strategy if it was indeed Bryan Kohberger. So look, that's the only thing in my mind that would make sense if Bryan Kohberger was indeed the DoorDash delivery driver, is that they know he is, and that is being withheld from the public, and that could potentially explain why a lot of this is gagged, because we've seen people named, we've seen the roommates who survived being named, and we've heard that the DoorDash delivery driver was cleared, but there's no name connected to it. And anyway, I'm going to move on from that, my thoughts on it. But like I say, if Bryan Kohberger is innocent and someone else is guilty, and you do then have to start considering other options. Those other options could be the likes of, indeed, Jack Showalter, who vanished quite early on. Now, that could be completely coincidental, that someone close to these victims just happened to have something prearranged that took them out of the country to a non-extradition country and continued to do the work with which his family were known for. It would appear sort of human aid stuff, doctor stuff, fixing people, helping people, and he could just be an absolute fucking hero, and he's being a hero over there. But he might not be. Jack, I don't feel that Jack is involved in it. I personally don't, even though if Bryan Kohberger is innocent, then could he be guilty? That's for you to decide. I personally don't think that Jack Decker is guilty. That's just my opinion at this stage. And there are people who I personally feel are more likely to be guilty than him. But that does mean doing something that makes me incredibly uncomfortable, and that is looking quite closely to home. What makes me think that there is a possibility that things weren't right at home and this could have turned into something more nefarious? And that is because it's happened. It's happened in the past. If you do some homework yourself on that famous thing that is Google, and Google where people have been found guilty of killing their housemates, you will see it's happened. And it's happened quite a few times. And it's been horrendous, some of these cases as well. Trust me, there's been some horrendous cases. They've tried to make it look like self-deletion and all sorts of things that happens. We've seen where friends have turned upon their friends, and multiple cases where this has happened, and people close to people are generally the people who do these things. We've seen this father who has recently, deleted his children in a horrendous story. So people close to people can murder loved ones, friends, family, acquaintances, so on and so forth. A lot of the time it is the people most closest to the victims who are indeed the people who done the crime. That's just life and facts. So what makes me think there's a possibility of that in the Idaho 4 case? And that is, again, looking at the DoorDash situation. And when paired with the Brian Kohberger version of events, and what you have to remember is that what we're saying in this scenario is that Brian Kohberger is innocent. So if he's innocent, then that time frame that the constraint of that time with which these murders happened, you lose that, because that constraint only exists in the story that puts Brian Kohberger as a guilty man. But if you lose that, then you've got a situation that then extends when these murders could have happened. So what do we know? We know that the victims arrived home earlier. So they're in the house, and they're in the house earlier. That is pretty much proven in the legal documentation. We hear things on the peripheral that there was arguments in the home. There was arguments between these. They weren't getting on as well as what some have considered, perhaps. Now, we don't know much about that. We certainly don't know what was going on, but we do know that something was going on. So there was perhaps animosity between them. We know that Xana had her doors locked, the locks changed, and that to me says that there was a trust issue in the house. There was something going on that would lead Xana to believe that she needed to make sure that her door could be locked. Now, some people turn around and say that's common. It's common, you have your door locked. In these student situations, you would make sure that you had a lock on your door. She was in a relationship with a partner, yada, yada, yada. I get that, and that is more than plausible. More than plausible. But I would also say that if that's the case, then they would have all had locks. All of the doors had locks. So when this person came in and done this crime, why didn't they have to break the doors down? Why didn't they have to kick in the doors to get in them? Because they would have been locked, because the doors had locks on them. And do you know what I mean? Xana would have had her door locked because she just changed it, a new lock. And she'd had it because she was there with her boyfriend and she don't want people walking in. That's what your theory would be. But that's not how things happened. Her door doesn't seem to have been locked on the night. So look, what else gives us an indication that there could have potentially been someone else? And that is, look, we know that there was a DoorDash delivery that took place. And we also know that it would appear that Xana's phone was on social media around a certain time. Now, these times, like I believe it was around 12 minutes past 4, around that sort of time, and the DoorDash delivery being placed at 4 a.m. kind of shows that that Xana at least was active. She was quite active. She was on social media. She was awake, which therefore I would imagine that her boyfriend was likely awake. She'd ordered food. The food delivery comes in. Now, if you try and fit that into Brian's guilty timeline, that becomes very difficult, because then you've got a potential murderer arriving simultaneously with a food delivery. So either that is a complete coincidence, completely, that he arrived at the exact same time, which would have meant that he would have had to have left where he came from in Washington, which is where this food would have come from, at exactly the same time. Pretty much. So they simultaneously left together, arrived together. They'd have literally, at that time of the morning, he would have likely fucking followed that car from his to there. Coincidence? Who knows? Now, what makes me think this is in scenarios where people have killed people close to them. They are either friends who live or family who live, they live together. What do? They try to do things that make once the deed has been done, to make it look like they are still alive. So they do things that changes the eyes away from a broader time frame, because people will look at it and think, well, they must have still been alive there because they were on their social media. They were obviously active on their phones then. And they ordered food, so they obviously was alive. But my question to that would be, how do we know who ordered the food? How do we know who ordered the food? How do we know who was on Xana's social media? Was Ethan's social media active at the same time? Was his phone active at the same time? Or was his phone completely inactive? No activity at all. And these are things that we're not privy to. So again, I'm simply going by what I have access to, what you have access to. And I believe that supports a theory that something could have happened earlier, but someone was potentially making it look like someone was still alive when they weren't. You then have to consider, if these students were killed in Brian's timeline, you have a situation where you've got a potential eyewitness who sees someone leave, but yet they give a description that is so vague that it doesn't give you anything. It gives you something, but it gives you nothing, because their face is covered. They've got a mask on. They're dressed in black. All you see is their eyes and their eyebrows, and you say they've got bushy eyebrows, which in effect is nothing. There's absolutely nothing. So you're given the perception of giving everything, because you're given an eyewitness account of seeing someone there, which shifts the focus away from you, because you are admitting, I saw someone here. I saw someone, I heard some noises, I heard what I thought was them playing with the dog, I heard someone potentially say, I'm here to help you, and I saw someone and I froze because they were there and they left. But in effect, what have you done? You've just deflected away from everything, because you've given no. There is nothing. There's nothing in that. In essence, there's nothing. Only that someone else was there, but you couldn't really see them. You've got another person who was a potential witness who hasn't come into the equation at all. Nothing at all. But very, very early on sought legal representation. Now, some people will say that was wise. Because of the situation they're in, it was wise to get legal representation. But why would you get legal representation if you're completely innocent of anything? You have no knowledge about anything. In fact, you was asleep, and the other person who did witness something, they had seen someone in the house and has admitted to seeing someone in the house. Why would you then feel that you still need to get legal representation? Unless you thought that there was a potential that people would delve into your history and what was going on, and it would make you look guilty. There was something that could potentially make you look guilty. See, all of these little things, when you start delving into them, it raises the question as to whether there was dangers closer to home. There was things going on in this house. And again, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying, in the event that Brian Kohberger could be innocent, and the only way you can tell me that I shouldn't be talking about these things is if you do not believe in the process, and that you're just saying that, no, that is definitely 100% Brian, 100% him. So you don't need to look anywhere else. You don't need to look at any other scenario situation, because the guy has been got. But again, I must state that at this stage, in the eyes of the law, he is innocent. You've got personal opinion. You've got personal, how you've understood the information that's been put out there. But you have to acknowledge the fact that to make him guilty comes with difficulties. Does anybody believe that someone who had never committed a crime prior, they've got no previous convictions, no nothing, they've done nothing before, they managed to do this crime in this small window, without raising more of, noise or anything that would have alerted the other people? And if he did, and if it was this altercation, there was this massive sort of fight and argument that Steve Gonsalves alluded to, then it would then further bring into question the surviving roommates, because surely they would have heard that. If you take what Steve Gonsalves said and try and figure out how that works without them hearing it, when at least one of them has basically said that they were awake and they were a few feet away from where it would have happened, how did they not hear anything? And if they heard it, why didn't they call 911? I feel I've gone off on a bit of a tangent. But all I'm saying is, someone did it. And if Brian didn't, someone else did. Now, if Moscow PD are saying that they've cleared the DoorDash delivery driver, so that then removes them from the equation, like a chessboard. They've gone. And the only way that I believe the DoorDash delivery driver would work in this theory is if Brian Kohberger is the DoorDash delivery driver, Moscow PD knows he is, and they lied to the public for some reason. And that is potentially why there was a huge gag order to hide that piece of information. And is that the exculpatory evidence that Brian feels would get him off? Did he think that by being the DoorDash driver, that would give him an excuse for being there? And does he know that at least one of them saw him? Did Bethany see him as the DoorDash delivery driver as he walked around the property? But that's a double-edged sword there, because I personally believe that if you take the roommates out of the equation and you take Brian out of the equation, then it only leaves the DoorDash delivery driver. Because I believe that who did this crime is either the DoorDash delivery driver, the roommates, or Brian. And like I say, if Moscow PD are being honest in the fact that they know who the DoorDash delivery driver is, it isn't Brian, then that puts that off the board. And again, I'll repeat, unless Brian was the DoorDash delivery driver, Moscow PD are hiding that fact, and Brian thinks that is what would be his exculpatory evidence, because his plan all along was to utilise that as an excuse for being there, which then would make him guilty. But if he's not guilty because he wasn't the DoorDash delivery driver, the DoorDash delivery driver isn't guilty either, then in my opinion, then at least focus remaining on the roommates. And there was enough issues to raise concern. If I was a parent of one of these victims and Brian was found innocent, the DoorDash driver was taken out of the equation, what would I be left thinking? When I know that there was potential issues in the home and there was a delay in calling 911 of several hours. Let me know what you think. Don't hit me. Don't throw stuff at me. I'm just saying, I'm just spitballing. I'm not a professional. have ideas, sharing them with my friends. Catch you all in the next one.